Have you ever been out on a weekend, maybe at a barbecue, and heard someone casually drop that they just bought a massive property using their superannuation? It always sounds a bit, flashy, maybe even a little intimidating, and it definitely leaves you wondering, what is the catch? Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to unpack exactly what sits behind those stories. Let's dive right in with a situation that I think a lot of us can relate to.
Picture this. It's a beautiful, sunny Saturday here in Australia. Sophie and Jack are out for a walk through a commercial display area. They really enjoy looking at different ideas for the future, kind of dreaming a bit about what their own financial independence might look like down the track. And while they're walking past a display featuring these different commercial properties, they overhear another couple talking. One of them is proudly boasting to a friend, saying, "I bought a commercial property with my super." It's a pretty bold claim, right? And it immediately catches Sophie and Jack's attention.
Sophie turns to Jack, looking quite curious, and says, "I always hear stories like that and wonder how it actually works." And honestly, she's voicing what so many of us think when we hear these grand tales of self-managed wealth. People love talking about the exciting end results. The property, the flashy business premises, but they rarely explain the actual mechanics of how it's allowed under the law.
Jack nods in agreement and replies, "Same here, but I feel like sometimes you only hear half the story." And Jack is absolutely right to be a little skeptical here. When it comes to self-managed superannuation funds, or SMSFs, those flashy stories are usually skipping over some very strict foundational rules. People love to share their wins, but let's be real, they don't usually stand around at a Saturday display village talking about legislative compliance.
So, a bit later, Sophie and Jack are grabbing a coffee, still kind of digesting that overheard conversation. Sophie starts thinking logically about the whole system and says, "If super is designed for retirement, I imagine you can't just do whatever you want with it." And right there, Sophie has hit the absolute nail on the head. She's intuitively grasped the core philosophy of the entire Australian superannuation system.
Jack leans in and adds, "Exactly. There must be a purpose behind how those assets are used." Now, Jack's choice of the word purpose right there perfectly tees up the most critical concept in SMSF regulation. Before anyone gets excited about buying property or making grand investments with their super, they have to understand the fundamental rule that governs every single decision they make. Let's look at how this builds.
So let's just ask the big question out loud. What is the actual purpose of a self-managed superannuation fund? Now, it might sound like a philosophical question, but in the world of super, it is a strict legal one. The system just isn't designed to be a flexible wealth-building tool for your everyday life right now. It has a very specific job to do, and the regulators require that every single fund remains fiercely dedicated to that exact job.
Enter the sole purpose test. In simple terms, this is the golden rule of the superannuation system. It's a legal requirement ensuring that a self-managed superannuation fund is maintained strictly for one main purpose, and that is providing retirement benefits for its members or benefits for their dependents if a member passes away. Basically, it means the fund exists for your future self, not your current self. Every investment, every transaction, and every single decision must pass this test.
Now, a very natural question pops up here, especially for people looking into an SMSF for the very first time. You might be thinking, wait, if I'm the trustee and it's my money, why can't I just use it for what I want? And hey, it's a fair question. The whole appeal of an SMSF is having more control and involvement in your investment decisions. But having control over how the money is invested is very, very different from having the right to actually use that money today.
To really wrap your head around this, you have to imagine your wealth divided into two entirely separate buckets. On one side, you have your personal assets, your bank accounts, your personal home, the cash you use for everyday life. On the other side, you have your SMSF assets. Even though you might be the one managing both, the law sees the SMSF as a completely separate legal structure. The money and assets inside that SMSF bucket are not your personal assets to enjoy right now. They are locked away for retirement.
So, the absolutely crucial point here is that having more involvement in your super does not mean you can extract immediate personal benefits. You cannot treat the fund like a personal piggy bank to help out with your cash flow issues, and you absolutely cannot mix personal and fund assets. If the fund provides a current day benefit to you or your relatives at a cost to the fund, the regulators will look at the objective facts and, they'll likely determine that the fund has failed the sole purpose test.
Let's circle all the way back to Sophie and Jack's Saturday walk. How does the sole purpose test actually relate to that guy boasting about buying a commercial property with his super? If the fund can't provide an immediate benefit, how on earth is he allowed to do that? Well, an SMSF can invest in commercial property, but the way it's done is exactly what separates a brilliant retirement strategy from a major legal breach.
The secret here is that investments must be on strict commercial terms, also known as an arm's length basis. For instance, an SMSF might buy a commercial property and even lease it back to a member's own business. That is actually a specific exception allowed under the rules. But, and this is a massive but, that lease must be at absolute market rates, exactly like you would charge a total stranger. The investment must be genuinely for the purpose of growing the fund's retirement balance, not just a sneaky way to give your own business cheap rent.
To make this super clear, let's look at some everyday examples of what breaking this rule actually looks like. Using fund money to pay for a personal holiday? Yeah, that's a breach. Buying a residential property through your SMSF and then living in it, or letting your kids live in it? Massive breach. Or how about having the fund buy a beautiful piece of artwork or a holiday home that you immediately put in your living room or use for summer vacations? That is immediate personal enjoyment, and it completely fails the sole purpose test. Now, I want to emphasize this calmly because I know it can sound intimidating. These rules are not here to punish people or make managing an SMSF unnecessarily stressful. They are simply a normal part of the system. Think of them as standard guardrails. They exist to protect your retirement future and keep your investment strategy focused on what really matters, ensuring that when you do finally retire, the money is actually there waiting for you, rather than having been slowly drained away by immediate personal perks over the years.
So the next time you hear someone boasting about their super investments, you will know the real story behind the scenes. It really begs the question, though, what other flashy financial myths out there are missing half the story? This content is general and educational. It is not financial advice. If you already have an SMSF or want to understand your compliance responsibilities, speak with the team at Wendy Super Accounting.